and we're going to work through each example that I have on the paper. There will be points where I will have you pause the video. I want you to try to do those problems, and then we will come back and I will go through. So we have to remember distributive property is distributing. So I'm taking the outside term and I'm distributing it to this term and that term. So I'm making a new equation. Then I'm solving it. So in this situation, I have 3 times 4, which gives me 12, and you multiply. One thing I saw was people were trying to divide. No division right yet. So you do 3 times 4, 3 times 5, which is 15, and that's the distributive property. Then, to solve it, you add these together and you get 27. Now, it's not always going to work like that. Let's take our next equation, which some of you had a hard time with this on the quiz. So, instead of one term, there are 2 terms. Still distribute. So I'm going to start with the 4a. So 4a times 2c. Well, 4 times 2 gives me 8. The variables have to come along. So this is 8ac. Now I'm taking the 4a and going to the next term. 4a times negative 4, that is negative 16, and I've got to include the variable. Now I'm moving on to the second term. 3 times 2c gives me 6c, and then 3 times negative 4 will give us negative 12. With this, you do not have any like terms, so that is our equation. I want you to look at the next one, pause the video, and try it on your own. So with this next one, we have 3 terms inside of the parentheses. We still distribute the 6. The 6 is distributed to the first term, the second term, then the third term. So 6 times 3 is 18, and I have to keep the variable with the term. Then I go to the next term, so 6 times negative 4a. That's going to give me negative 24a. Then 6 times the last term, which is 10, so plus 60. Now, in this equation, you have 2 like terms. What I mean by like terms is all of it looks the same. Now, when you're distributing, you do not have to have like terms because it's multiplication. But once I distribute, now I'm having an addition or subtraction problems, so the like terms is an issue. So now it is 18a and 24a. Well, we're going to end up with a negative, okay, because the larger number has the minus sign attached to it. Another way to think of this problem, it's the same as 24 minus 18. If this is confusing, just put it as a simple subtraction problem. So 24 minus 18 would give me 6. Well, in my equation, it's going to be negative 6a. I always have to remember that a, plus 60. I cannot combine these 2 terms because they are not alike. A is a variable. 60 does not have the variable, so this is my answer. I can't go any further than this. Pause the video here so you can write down these problems. Now, some of you were having a bit of an issue with the negative, okay? So if there is a negative by itself outside the parentheses, this is meaning you're taking the negative and you're distributing the negative. Now, when you have a negative just outside, you always assume there's a 1. So it's -1. Anything times 1 is itself. That's why you do not need to include it. So it's like -1 times 15. That's going to give me now -15. -1 times -2a. That negative turns that into a positive, and it is 2a. -1 times 3b. -3b. And now we look at if there are like terms. There are not, so we stop at that equation. Next one, -4a. The variable is with the 4, so the variable has to also be distributed. So yet again, distribute to the first term, second term, third term. Now, this has a negative attached to it. So now I go -4 times 3. Well, that's going to give me -12. I need to continue with the variables, so it's -12ab. Then -4a times -5a. Well, that becomes a positive because a negative times a negative gives you a positive. 5 times 4 is 20. A times a is a squared. Now on to the third term. -4a times 4c. Going to give me a -16ac. I do not have like terms. You can keep it this way. Now, there's another thing that once we get into algebra, it will dictate that you put this term in the front because you have squaring. So you could rewrite this as 20a squared minus 12ab minus 16ac. Now, the other thing you have to make sure you understand is AB and AC and a square are all unalike because they do not look like each other. Okay, last term, -a. Well, remember, we assume that if there's a variable, there's an invisible 1 there, but we don't have to put the 1. So we're going to distribute -a to our 3 terms. So -a times 4c, this becomes -4ac. Now, if you notice, I am putting the letter of the alphabetical way of phrasing the variables. It's just a natural thing that I was taught. If you do, and the other thing is, since it's outside and it's first, it usually goes first in the equation. Now, -a times -3, that becomes a positive 3a. Then -a times 14, -14a. Now again, I look at the terms and I see I have 2 terms that are alike, so I have to combine them. So I bring the -4ac down because I'm not going to mess with that. And then I've got 3a minus 14a. Well, I know it's going to be -11a. Now, I did say earlier this year that this sign can either be a negative or a subtraction sign, depending upon how I'm looking at it. When I'm figuring out here, I say it's a negative. When I read the statement, -4ac minus 11a, that's when it turns into that subtraction sign again. So now I want you to pause the video, and you have 4 problems. I want you to try these on your own and see if they make more sense now.